Welcome back to Storytime. Today we're going to be continuing our audio reading of Machines and Men. But before we get into today's chapter, just a quick reminder, Storytime is not about me or about us here at Creant. This is a community effort. So if you have any stories that you'd like us to read, please send them to us and we'll consider it and put them into videos. Now, Chapter 2 of Machines and Men. Chapter 2. A Friend in Need. Stephen trudged up the stairs to Andy's apartment. Andy was the only one of Stephen's college friends that had stayed in San Diego after graduation. He was about a head shorter than Stephen, with rusty reddish-brown hair, with thick black glasses and a sort of hipsterish vibe. He was a writer by profession, mostly doing travel blogs and pieces for the newspaper, but with aspirations of writing a novel. Stephen had been over to Andy's apartment more times than he could remember. He pretty much lived there, and the two men had become almost like siblings. Andy was the sort of friend that Stephen knew he could always count on for comfort and advice. Using his key, Stephen opened the door and walked straight in. Andy was sprawled across the couch, playing video games. He scarcely looked up as Stephen closed the door and said unconcernedly, "Sup, loser?" Yeah, whatever. I'm gonna go eat your food and get love from your cat. I need an emotional support animal right now," Stephen said, moving towards the kitchen. "Don't feed Apollo," Andy called, waving a hand over the top of the couch, his eyes still locked on the screen. "He tore open a new bag of kitty chow while I was working yesterday and wolfed down about a third of it before I stopped him, so he's being punished. Besides, he's getting fat." Stephen stooped and picked up the meowing ginger cat, who was now rubbing at his legs, groaning slightly under the not unconsiderable weight of the animal. Apollo really was quite fat, but he was also extremely fuzzy, and that was the more important thing. Stephen cuddled the cat and was happy for the opportunity. There really was something to say for the unconditional love of animals, allergies or no. Apollo took the cuddling in stride for a minute or so, but realizing no food was forthcoming, slipped out of Stephen's arms with the fluidity that only a cat can manage, and unconcernedly hopped onto the bed where he promptly fell asleep. "So," Andy said, looking over the top of his glasses at Stephen expectantly. Stephen blew out a long sigh and tilted his head back. Honestly, he wasn't clear on his feelings. Rage was there in spades, and sadness also. Once he started talking, it all flowed out of him like a river. The hurt, feelings, everything. Andy listened carefully to everything, grunted appreciatively at the right moments, and in general made himself useful in the indispensable role of consummate listener. "Well," Andy said when Stephen had finished, "it sucks about Becky, man, but you'll find someone else. For now, you and I will go get drunk, and you'll forget about this. You can crash here tonight if you want, and probably things will look a bit better once you've gotten your buzz on." Andy was spot on with his prediction, and by the time the two men stumbled back to his apartment, Stephen was anything but depressed. He had hit on a girl at the bar, but due to his drunkenness and the fact that the girl was easily 12 years younger than him, nothing had come of it. Andy prepped his hookah with a combination of pot and shisha, and the two sat smoking in silence for a while. "I'm such a loser," Stephen said despondently. Andy looked over to his friend to find him slumped over on the arm of the couch. Stephen's eyes were bloodshot, though it was tough to tell if it was from the pot or from crying. Certainly, there was moisture in his eyes, but at the same time, he was also a giggly mess, so Andy decided to err on the supportive side. "You're not a loser," Andy sighed, taking a long hit of his hookah. "Don't let Becky get to you, man. She just doesn't know a good thing when she sees it." "It's not that," Stephen said, taking the offered hookah. "I mean, look at me. I'm 29 years old. I've got a dead-end job, a college debt up to my eyeballs, and no prospects for change. By the time my dad was my age, he had 3 degrees, been married twice, and had a career he liked and would work at for another 40 years. Jesus, it's depressing. Man, whatever. You have a job you don't hate, you have your own place, and despite all that debt you're always harping about, you always seem to have money to spend. Could be worse. Think about Alexander the Great's son. My dad conquered Macedonia when he was 19. No pressure, right?" Stephen laughed at that and had to hold back a fit of coughing as he inhaled the hookah smoke. "Fuck, man. Don't make me laugh when I'm smoking," Stephen gasped between coughs. "Point is, you're not so very bad off, Steve," Andy said, as Stephen passed him the hookah again and got up to go get a glass of water. "I mean, you did just get $50K from your great aunt, right? So that'll go a long way towards paying off that debt of yours." Yeah, I suppose, Stephen responded from the kitchen, though I was going to use that money to get a new car. My suspension's shot all to hell, and no car means I can't go to work, no work means no money, and so on. Blah, blah, blah. Besides, it's will money, so I'm happy for the windfall, but it kind of sucks because it comes with death. Word, Andy agreed, nodding. Still, don't even worry about it. We'll get your dating profile up to scratch because, no offense, it sucks donkey dong right now, and you'll be back on that horse in no time. Of course, things seldom go exactly as planned, and so it proved for Stephen. While it is true he reworked his dating profile on the usual sites, it was also true that the internet is a scary place. Every day, and sometimes several times a day, for the better part of a month, Stephen would check his profile. He would make the rounds of the dating sites, send messages, pokes, winks, right swipes, and so on. But no matter how many messages he sent, nothing seemed to come of it. What really grinds me, Stephen complained one afternoon when he and Andy were sitting in a Starbucks using their free Wi-Fi, is all the girls who just put "no games" or "be real" as a description for themselves and nothing else. I mean, what the hell am I supposed to do with that? How is it possible that there are this many lonely people out there and I can't find a sweet, gentle, friendly, nerdy girl to date me? Andy raised an eyebrow. Haven't you gotten any responses at all? No. Stephen grimaced, blowing out a sigh. Everything just falls into the nether void. What I don't get is why it is that in this enlightened age of 2035, we men have to do all the wooing. I don't know about you, but I could stand to have women message me for a change. 'Tis the nature of the beast, my friend, Andy said, taking a swig of his coffee. They run, we pursue. Then, adopting his best David Attenborough impression, Andy continued, Here we see the human female in its natural environment. These creatures disguise themselves in the camouflage of their mall environments and travel in small herds of 8 to 5 individuals. Look, the leader has picked up the scent of a pumpkin spice latte, Stephen joked, looking at a group of gabbling teenage girls. Now the group has locked onto the scent. There is no escape for the pumpkin spice latte, and it is only a matter of time before it is ruthlessly devoured. The two men laughed loudly, toasting their questionable wit. Stephen turned his attention back to the screen of his laptop and took a sip of his coffee. It was so natural to expect pop-up ads on dating sites that Stephen had pretty well learned to tune them out. He vaguely registered an ad on the sidebar of a gorgeous supermodel in skimpy lingerie, but then he did a double take. This woman was at first glance the same sort of woman that you always saw in these sorts of ads. But upon closer inspection of the picture, Stephen was surprised to see that there were tiny seams around her neck, on her shoulders and hips. Reading the jargon across the top, Stephen's eyes began to widen. New Doll 300 series. Self-powering, fully articulated, and indistinguishable from real humans. 90% of consumers say they can't tell the difference. Hey, dude, Stephen said, his eyes locked on the screen. Take a look at this. Andy leaned over and looked at the advertisement and snorted a laugh. Oh yeah, I've seen these before. They're like sex dolls, but they've got some serious robotic tech on board. It's like sex at 300 RPMs or something like that, Andy said, rolling his eyes. Stephen laughed, but his eyes were still locked on the screen. The idea was ludicrous, laughable. Who could ever consider dating a robot? It was just a hunk of metal and circuitry. It wasn't alive. It couldn't think or feel But then again, he thought to himself, robotic technology had grown by leaps and bounds throughout the 21st century. Robots had gone from giant machines for assembly lines in factories to housekeepers and household normalities. Stephen himself couldn't remember a time when robots hadn't been integrated into his life. They were always in the background, cleaning and so on. He'd never really noticed them before. Even now, as they sat in the Starbucks, Stephen became aware of no less than 10 robots of one sort or another just in the part of the cafe they were sitting in. The teenage girls had 3 small robots at their table, each with a smartphone device synced up with it, gesturing and mimicking the actions of the person on the other side of the video chat. A larger robot with a round head and friendly-looking eyes was motoring around with a tray delivering drinks on 3 small wheels. A fat woman was drinking an energy drink and looking at her watch with a portable fitness robot monitoring her heart rate. Now that he was thinking about it, robots had integrated themselves into just about every aspect of life. They were secretaries, nurses, personal trainers, even teachers, so why couldn't they be lovers as well? There were plenty of people that had emotions towards robots. They referred to them as he or she, anthropomorphizing their technical devices and making them almost like pets. The truth was that people liked robots, though for the most part that was because they were designed to be liked. Robots had deliberately cute features, large eyes, round edges, cheerful noises. They were, as the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy had put it, your plastic pal who's fun to be with. Humanoid robots, of course, garnered a lot of attention in the media, and while they were frequently applauded for their selfless acts of heroism, rescuing people from fires or carrying loads into combat, they were feared by a lot of people. The question of robot rights was frequently debated in regards to humanoid robots as well. Just exactly where did one draw the line between a person and a possession? But the idea of robot companions did have a sort of appeal to Stephen. He wasn't sure where he stood on the ethical implications of dating a robot, but he had to admit there was a certain feeling of adventure in it. Moreover, if he was going to be honest with himself, the opportunity to create his ideal woman was somewhat intriguing. What would she be like? He couldn't deny that he had planned the answer to that question. Of course he had. Who hadn't? Everybody at one point or another imagines their ideal mate, what they would be like, and what would it be like to actually meet them? Stephen was leaning against the wall in the break room. Nearly a week had passed since he first saw the Doll 300 ad, but for some reason he couldn't stop thinking about it. He had begun to think more and more about this mystery woman. She haunted his dreams. He could almost see her. He began more and more to feel like Pymiglian, chasing after Galatea. The idea began to obsess him. How much would it cost? And more importantly, what would she be like? Who would his Galatea be? He was surprised to find that the issue of dating a robot was clinging to his mind with such tenacity. A robot was not a person, no matter how much it looked like one. Could he really have feelings for a machine? Well, the answer to that question was an emphatic yes, he reflected. He remembered the feeling of loss he had experienced when his first car had been totaled by a garbage truck. The whole left side had been crushed to a pulp, and it had brought actual tears to his eyes. The insurance company had bought him a replacement car of the same make and model, but it hadn't been his car. Maybe he was just anthropomorphizing again. Still, the idea had grown larger and larger in his mind in the past few days. Everyone had their favorite shirt, their favorite toy growing up. They could get downright crazy when it came to their pets. Some people could even learn to love a lizard or snakes, and all they did was sit around and bask all day. Now that he thought of it, Stephen wasn't sure how he would qualify a robot companion. Were they pets? Possessions? When a person bought a dog, they were its owner. But could you really own a living thing? Wasn't that slavery? Were dogs human slaves bred in captivity to serve us? The line of questioning was disconcerting. But a humanoid robot was a different story. This was an issue that the media had gone crazy with. That was largely because of the phrase the news had coined, robotic pet. It started with robotic dogs, but now there were humanoid robots, and the whole game had changed. Stephen rocked back and forth in his chair, musing on the subject. The door to the break room opened, and Jennifer and Rich came in. Stephen generally liked his coworkers, though most of them were older than he was. Jennifer was a pleasant woman of about 45, with short hair and a smoker's voice. Rich was a bit older, a touch of gray in his goatee. Both of them had a relaxed look that comes with doing the same job for several years. Hey, totally random question, Steve posed as the others settled themselves. Would either of you ever knowingly date a robot? There was a momentary pause while they considered the question. Honestly, I'd say no, Jennifer said pensively. It just seems a little weird to me. I don't know. I think I would, depending on if I knew it was a robot, Rich said as he began unpacking his lunch. If it looks like Rosie the robot, then no. But if it looks like Heather Chandelure, well, maybe. It just seems odd to me, Jennifer said again. I guess it would be something some people might be into, but not me. I need someone real, you know? I was just thinking, Steve mused, because people do weird things. I mean, take embalming, for example. Who was the first person to say, well, I've got this body, I guess I'll dump it in chemicals and preserve it for 20 years? It's pretty odd when you think about it, but we've been doing it for hundreds of years. I think I would probably date a robot, Rich mused. But I wouldn't marry a robot, if you know what I mean. I've seen too many movies where that ends badly. Stephen returned to his desk sometime later. His mind was still trying to get a grip on his position on the subject of robot dating. Without really thinking about it, he opened a new search window and typed in Doll 300. It couldn't hurt to look, he thought. The Doll 300 series was the latest version of humanoid robots produced by Blue Fairy Incorporated. The company specialized in robot companions, according to the website, providing robots for emotional support and care. Stephen scoffed at the idea of an emotional support robot at first, but as he looked through the gallery of images, he began to see what they meant. Mostly, robots were human in shape only. The majority were pristine white with the usual exaggerated features to endear them to humans. But the doll robots were different. Clearly, the manufacturers were more invested in making them look more human. They definitely looked more realistic, though there was an intangible feeling that there was something wrong with the faces. He couldn't put his finger on what, but there was something subtly wrong with the face, something that was mildly unsettling. But they were the older doll models. The new 300 series, on the other hand, looked way more realistic. Stephen found himself again thinking of the ad he had seen. 90% of people can't tell the difference. Now he was beginning to understand why. He found himself looking at an image of one of the dolls. It was a professional photograph depicting a man and woman. They were the usual early 20-something couple one always found in advertising pictures. The couple was smiling and laughing, and for several minutes he couldn't tell which of them was the robot. They were both attractive people, but he looked at the man and could tell that there was the very faintest sign of model fletching around the smiling face, and his eyes were just a little too blue. Stephen couldn't believe how realistic the doll was. He studied the picture for a very long time, and then shifted his glance to the top of the screen where the tab said, Offices Near You. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please hit that like button, and if you really enjoyed it, feel free to subscribe. We will have more episodes of Storytime every Thursday at noon, so feel free to ring that bell and get notified as to when our new videos drop.